Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
Welcome, everybody. Glad you're joining us today for Manager Monday. Elena, thank you for conducting this webinar today. We are so happy that you are sharing this information, and I am going to let you take over.
So you are joining us for Managing Monday using the National Student Clearinghouse to track MSG Type 1B. I will be presenting along with Josh Hayes. He will be presenting a little bit later. He is the AEL Director for College of the Mainland. So we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so what we will be covering today, MSG Type 1B, post-secondary enrollment after exit. Some basics on this. There may be a few new people on this webinar that are not familiar with all of the MSGs, or maybe you need a refresher because sometimes they can be a little bit confusing, especially, how you get credit for them or what type of documentation you might be using. So we're going to be covering a little bit on what is MSG Type 1B, just a little bit of foundation, the documentation that you would use for this MSG to get credit for it, and how to enter it into teams. Then we're going to go over the current statistics for MSG Type 1B. We're going to go over the last couple of years, how we've done in that area for post-secondary enrollment after exit. And then I will be sharing the survey results. So some of you received an invitation back in January to help us prepare for this webinar. And we wanted to know who was familiar with the National Student Clearinghouse, who was using it to verify MSG Type 1B, and also credential attainment. So I'll be sharing those results. And then we'll go into what is the National Student Clearinghouse, what are the advantages of using the National Student Clearinghouse, and also how to access it. And then we'll have Josh Hayes present on his experience in using this database and this information or verification of MSG Type 1B. So what I would love for you to do walking away from this webinar or be able to accomplish is know where to find information on the National Student Clearinghouse. So some of you may already be familiar with this resource. They've been around since 1993. I really didn't start getting clear on what they did and what they had to offer until most recently, when I really started, looking into, would this be something that we could use as a tool for verification of this type of MSG? But I think I first heard of the National Student Clearinghouse several years ago from Southwest Texas Junior College. They were using it to verify their MSG Type 1G. But this was back when I was a program specialist, so it wasn't something that we really followed through on. So I'm glad we're doing that today. Confirm whether you have access to the National Student Clearinghouse and whether your organization is using it. So this is very, very important. And I think you'll find with the information that is shared today that many of you do have access to it. Your organization does have access to it, but you just weren't aware of it. So I think this will be very helpful to you. If you do find that you have access to it, how you can get the information and use that for verifying your MSG Type 1B. Also, get credit for post-secondary enrollments using this tool. Now, we know that we've really been struggling in this area. We know that students are going on to post-secondary, but sometimes it's really, really difficult to get the information that we need to verify with documentation. So this, I think, will really open the gates to helping everyone across the state to really track their students and see how well they're moving into the next phase of their goal setting after completing their HSEs. Or even before. Sometimes they come to us before that and they don't even need an HSE. They just want to get into post-secondary so we can better track those individuals. So I want to be very, very clear so that we don't go down any rabbit holes today. We are only presenting information on MSG type 1B. So please don't be disappointed when I don't go into 3, 4, and 5 or 2. Just know that we want to keep it very clear on what the focus is, and we want to maybe most especially stay on track with the information that we're presenting. If you do need more information on MSGs, the other type 1A, type 2, 3, 4, or 5, the AEL Performance Guide is the resource that you probably want to go to first. We have put it in the chat for you. If you are not familiar with this guide, but you are working in AEL, I would highly suggest that you become familiar with this document because it's going to be very helpful to you. And you can also reach out to your PD specialist. Your PD specialist will know of trainings that have been already recorded and put into the PD portal on MSG. So the program specialists have done several recordings already, giving general information on MSGs. And your PD specialist can direct you to where those recordings are if you want more information. Okay, so one thing I want to clarify for people in the field, because sometimes I think there's a little bit confusion between an MSG and a credential. One of the main differences, but again, I want to emphasize this is not the only difference, but one of the big differences that an MSG must be earned in the program year. So here's an example. If a participant is continuing for all 4 program years here, starting from 18-19 all the way to 22-23, they have to get an MSG for every single program year. That's really, really important to understand. Now, a credential is a little bit different in the sense of when you can attain it. It can be attained within the program year, or you have up to a year after the participant has exited services for them to attain that credential. Now, the MSG does not have that flexibility. If a person exits, a program year ends, you cannot continue to apply that MSG for the post-secondary enrollment type 1B. So I want to emphasize that. It's really, really important that if you're trying to get credit for that post-secondary enrollment, MSG type 1B, it has to be captured for that program year. That means before the data closes. So really, really important to share that with you. So just real basic understanding of MSG type 1B, it's documented post-exit enrollment in post-secondary education or training during the same program year that contains the date of exit. So for those who are not familiar with what exiting means, I'm just going to try to simplify it as much as I can. I don't want you to get too caught on keeping track of this information because as you'll see further into the presentation, our database does that for you. Teams does that for you. It establishes the exit date for you. So there's none of this, I need to wait 90 days for a person to exit to enter information into Teams. So what exit means for our database, it just means that there has been no activity for that individual uninterrupted for 90 days. Okay, so they leave, let's say they stop coming to your classes on March 15th and nothing is entered for them moving forward in terms of maybe a direct hour or a proxy hour or something like that. 90 days will go by and teams will identify that last date, March 15th, I think that's what I said, as being the date of exit. So that's basically what exiting means. So when does post-secondary enrollment count? It counts as soon as that person enrolls into post-secondary and they no longer have any activity with AEL. Right? No longer coming to you for services, no longer getting contextualized instruction or tutoring or anything like that. So here's an example. This is a program year starting July 1st until June 30th. The participants' period of participation was July 15th to January 10th. They started at the local community college on January 11th. That will be their start. And that's when the post-secondary enrollment will be counted as long as that individual no longer has recorded activity in teams. Okay, so just try to keep it simple for everybody. All right, so getting into the guidance and where information can be found on this, because I know it's always like, okay, this is what you're telling us, but where can we reference this information? Again, that performance guide is going to be really important for you on page 22, MSG type 1B. Again, what I just went over, basically a participant earns this MSG when he or she enrolls in a post-secondary education or training program that leads to a post-secondary credential after the participant exits AEL services. So to earn this MSG, the participant must do the following within the program year. So they must be below the post-secondary level in one or more content areas. That will be established when you're bringing them into services and you're pre-testing them. So they automatically qualify for services if they are at a certain level of learning. So that kind of takes care of that first requirement. Exit AEL services and have no planned gap entered into teams. So this is also very important. I know some of you know what a planned gap is. So if you have colleagues that don't, after this call, please explain it to them again, because sometimes it's not grasped the first time or they don't really understand it until they see how it's entered into teams. So a planned gap just really extends a person's period of participation. So again, a person may leave your services, but temporarily. So give an example, someone is maybe a migrant farm worker, but you know that they're only going to be gone for a certain period of time and they'll return after they've maybe gone 4 months. And this is just something they do every year. So it's not that they plan to leave forever and exit. So you want to keep their period of participation open. Now, if you didn't put in a planned gap, a person would leave services, be gone the 4 months, and then they would be exited from services. And then you're re-establishing their period of participation. With a planned gap, it basically extends the time that they can be away and they are not exited from services. So just a general explanation. If you need more assistance with understanding what a planned gap is, please reach out to your program specialist and they can explain it to you further. The next thing is after exit, but within the same program year, enroll in a post-secondary education or training program that leads to post-secondary credential. So this activity needs to happen within the program year. So if it doesn't happen in the program year, you cannot count it as an MSG. It could potentially be counted as a credential if it happens after the program year, because again, you can track a credential up to a year after a person has exited and even into a new program year, even though they're no longer with you in services. So again, have to emphasize it happens within the program year if you want to get credit for an MSG. Okay, so documentation for MSG type 1B. What we've been really relying on is trying to get verification from the student or trying to get verification from a college. Now, for AEL providers that are colleges, it sometimes is easiest for them, but sometimes it's difficult for them too, as you'll see with the data that I'll present a little bit later in this presentation. You'll see just how difficult it is to get proof of enrollment from a college. And it's even more difficult when an individual has left your services and you're trying to track them and ask them to bring something to you. But generally, we'd be asking for a transcript, proof of enrollment. These are the different options that we give to you. For today's purposes and using verification from the National Student Clearinghouses, it would fall under most likely other forms of documentation deemed appropriate by TWC AEL staff. So I want to emphasize this. And because we're sharing this today, we are saying, yes, you can use this documentation. I'm not advocating that you just make up anything you want to use. You always have to run it by us so we can let you know, yes, that can be appropriate or not. The very, very important thing to know is that anything you put in Teams, anything that you're claiming credit for, you need to have documentation to back that up, or you need to have some kind of matching that has happened on the back end that verifies that. So given an example of matching are HSC completions, another example, employment verification, that's also matching. Those are things that you don't normally have to get documentation for because we're already doing the matching for you on the back end. But everything else, for the most part, aside from testing, maybe because Teams already determines that for you. If it's going to be an MSG, if someone makes progress on with a post test, most things that you're entering into Teams in terms of an MSG or a credential, you're going to have documentation to back that up, and that's going to be in the student file. So if you want to see this information, it's on the AEL Performance Guide, page 22. More guidance, page 23, also in the Performance Guide. All grantees must ensure that the staff documents post-secondary enrollment in Teams by adding a new educational enrollment activity on the educational outcome screen. Teams automatically determines if proper conditions exist for the post-secondary enrollment to count toward MSG Type 1B based on participant status and last service date. There may be a delay in the education and enrollment appearing as an MSG until official exit has been established. So there's a couple of really important things to pay attention to here. One, making sure that you enter this information, because if you don't enter it, you're not getting credit for it. The other thing is where to actually enter it into Teams. So you're not going to enter it in where you would normally count an MSG. You're going to enter it into educational outcome screen. And I'll show you a screenshot of that in a minute and where to enter it into Teams. But very, very important to know where to enter it. Also, the third thing to remember is what I kind of mentioned before. Don't try to do the calculations of when a person exits. Don't worry about has 90 days elapsed or anything like that. You just enter the information and Teams will determine when that exit date is established, and they will give you credit for the MSG. This is very, very important. I can't emphasize this part enough. So entering it into Teams, and I have to say this because I know that people and programs are doing a lot to get people into post-secondary enrollment, but the information is not being captured. So that just means you're not getting credit for your efforts. And if it's not showing up in Teams, then for our purposes, for performance purposes, for reporting, it didn't happen. That's why we really, really want to share this information today, and we make sure that you understand how to get credit for this. So if you go to a participant's profile, you're going to see a couple of options at the top, but you're going to see test summary, educational outcomes, yada, 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 right? What you're going to want to select is educational outcomes, the second option. So when you select that, the second screen will pop up, and you're going to have measurable skills gains, credentials, and then educational enrollment. For the purposes of MSG Type 1B post-secondary enrollment, you are going to go straight to educational enrollment. You're not going to enter anything into measurable skills gains for this specific MSG. Okay, again, we're only talking about MSG Type 1B. So you're going to go into educational enrollment, and you're going to add an enrollment. Okay. Now, when you come to this screen, you're going to see a couple of things. You're going to see a start date, an end date, educational enrollment type. And this is where you'll select post-secondary enrollment, okay? And then you'll put who the educational provider is. Now, the provider could be a number of different organizations, depending on where the student decided to continue their education. So we want to make sure that this is correct, what you enter here. The details, if you're going to be using the National Student Clearinghouse information to verify post-secondary MSG Type 1B, you want to make a note of that in here so that it's easy for anybody who has to follow up with this, or let's say you get monitored, you know what documentation to look for in the student file. And then, of course, you want to make a note of who entered that information or this information. So a couple of things to remember here. Teams will select the end date, do not change. So the end date, when you put in a start date, and the start date is what you're going to take from the National Student Clearinghouse documentation or what they provide to you in terms of a start date, you're going to enter it here. And then Teams will automatically generate an end date. Do not change this end date. I can't explain it. I just don't want to confuse people. If you want to know why you shouldn't change this end date, please put it in the chat. I'll go into detail over it. Just know that it automatically gets populated and you don't want to change this end date. The next thing is Teams will calculate the exit date for MSG type 1B determination. So again, you don't have to do anything. Teams will do the calculating for you. You just get that start date in there, and Teams will determine when a person has exited, because you're not going to get credit for this until the person actually exits, but Teams will be doing the counting for you. And as soon as that happens, then the date will be picked. And then Teams will automatically count the entry as an MSG if it applies. So what does that mean? That means once you've entered this information into the educational enrollment, when Teams finally determines that it qualifies as post-secondary enrollment after exit, it will automatically populate for you in the measurable skills gains. So just like when someone gets post-tested and they make a gain, it automatically populates. When someone gets matched with an HSC, it will automatically populate also in the measurable skills gain section. So I really, really hope that you guys remember that and you're passing this on to your data entry people. So when should you be capturing data? This is also equally important because, as you know, in AEL, there's many different types of providers. We have ISDs, we have ESCs, we have colleges, we have workforce boards, we have COBs. We need to understand when the college is actually enrolling. So this is a very basic understanding of when classes start for a college. But we have summer 2, which more or less may start in July. And for colleges, if this isn't exactly aligns with your timeline, please don't get offended. Just know that I'm using this as a general example because I know sometimes dates are different for the different schools. For fall, we're looking at maybe around August to September, and then it'll run through December. Spring, January through May, and then summer 1 sometimes is offered, and sometimes they'll have mini semesters also, but I didn't put that in here. So that will happen around June. So comparing that to our timeline in quarters for our program year, our first quarter for AEL is July 1st to September 30th. So that will align with summer 2 and fall for colleges. So when you're thinking about when should I be looking at getting this information from the colleges, you have 2 opportunities really for that quarter 1 data. And then quarter 2, second quarter, October 1st to December 30th. So this would be captured really mainly with the fall enrollment. So that's when you would be looking towards, going into the NSE or getting with your college or following up with the student to get information for fall enrollment. But of course, remember, they've already enrolled before they started classes. So they'll have their schedule before that. The National Student Clearinghouse should have that information before they start classes. So you can start entering that information. And then quarter 3 is January 1st to March 31st. That's going to follow the spring for most colleges, spring class start dates. And then we have the 4th quarter, which also, falls into the spring, but also runs into the summer schedule for colleges. So it's always important to keep in mind, when is the activity happening for the student? So you have multiple opportunities throughout the year. You just have to be familiar with the timelines. So let's look at what post-secondary enrollment looked like for the past couple of years. In 1920, we had 306 verified enrollments that was captured in Teams. We had 147, so this was the fun COVID year. I think that was COVID year. And it was a lot harder capturing information, and people probably weren't enrolling. as much in colleges. And then 21, 22, we saw enrollment go up and it continues to go up. So 22, 23 last year, we had 425, which is great. This year in February, so this information is only up until February. It's from vetted data that we get from our I3 department. We have 239 as of February. So it's probably gone up since then, but we definitely want to see that we can do more than 425. Okay, so what I'm sharing is a breakdown of who has been contributing to these numbers. Who has been contributing to post-secondary enrollment last year? This is only for last year, okay? I'm not looking at all the prior years. What you see at the very top will be who our AEL grant recipients are. So we have 2 CBOs, 5 ISDs, 17 colleges, 7 ESCs, and 4 workforce boards. So why is that important? Well, you'll see in a minute how information is gathered by the National Student Clearinghouse and who has access to it already, and why, as a community college, you should be aware of this source and how it could help you, because you have access to it. I'm going to say that you do have access to it. Maybe not you personally, but your organization has access to that information. So what you see in green is everybody that contributed to that total number we saw for 22, 23. And the number that you see in parentheses will be that number that they contributed. So example, Community Action had 8 post-secondary enrollment in teams, Literacy Council 8, Weatherford 24, so on and so forth. So everybody in green, everybody in black that was a grant recipient did not show any activity for post-secondary enrollment. Now, this next slide is a little bit more detailed because this goes into the subrecipients and who's contributing to that post-secondary enrollment number. So what I did was I took all of the grant recipients that had subrecipients and I listed them out. So here you'll see all of the subrecipients, and you can see just how much of a reach AEL actually has throughout Texas. Because again, it's not just a grant recipient that is doing the work. You have a lot of organizations within consortiums, subrecipients that are contributing to this work or actually doing the work, right? So again, everybody in black didn't have a direct number. I think Community Action Agency, because they had a number before, I didn't put it there. Everybody in green is going to be a college. So what I really wanted to emphasize was how many colleges we actually have participating in AEL. And there's quite a bit, as you can see. And then again, if they had contributed to the post-secondary enrollment, I had put the number in parentheses. So Dallas College 45, here with Houston Galveston, we have Brazos 46, College of the Mainland 80. And then across the top, in terms of how it's laid out, I put who had the highest enrollment. So Austin Community College total had 145. Houston Galveston had 119, and so on and so forth. And you can see the numbers declining as we move towards the right of the slide. So let's talk about the different scenarios we have in terms of getting documentation for post-secondary enrollment after exit. The first example is going to be any AEL provider that's not a college. Any AEL provider that's not a college, scenario 1, would generally try to get information from a participant, either a transcript, a report card, or something, verification from them that they enrolled into college after exiting. Or they would hopefully have a relationship with a local college that's providing that information to them because they have an agreement to share information. This is really the toughest scenario when you think about it, because whoever this is, if you're not a college, you're doing a lot of work trying to get this information. And you all know this. I know that we'd see higher numbers if it were easier. The second scenario is really important because this would be your college that's an AEL provider or even a subrecipient. that is already that organization. So for example, Dallas College, College of the Mainland, any community college, university that is already an AEL provider. Now you have two scenarios within scenario 2. The first scenario is the AEL provider has a system that they can follow and track the students into the college. So maybe they have a student ID and, you know, they're enrolled like any other college student, and it's easy to track them. It's easy to pull a report from the college database, and they can see that a student enrolled after leaving AEL services. The other scenario is an AEL provider needs to yet still establish a relationship with the registration department, I guess, or enrollment department. So we're seeing a lot of that where the AEL provider really hasn't established a way of tracking the student or sharing information even within their own organization, which is pretty surprising. And I know that a lot of you are dealing with this challenge, and maybe, you know, for you, it's just been too many other things to worry about other than tracking a student. But you would think that if you are an AEL provider and you are a college and the organization that you work with should have this information that should be provided to you, there should be an agreement. You would think that would be in place, but we're really not seeing that, at least with the data. Now, this third scenario would be working with the National Student Clearinghouse. So you could be any provider, even if you were already a college. If you were getting information from the National Student Clearinghouse, or it was being provided to you by your organization, let's say you're a college, the work's already being done for you. So what does that mean? That means the National Student Clearinghouse is already working with 3,550 colleges and universities throughout the United States, and they're collecting that information already. So it's in their database. And you as a provider would only have to get verification through them, right? So you would get a printout, and I'll show you in a minute how that works, how, you know, you would submit something to them and then they would send something back to you showing whether or not a student is enrolled based on where they're at, what college they're going to, what school they're going to, did they enroll full time, when did they enroll, and even if they completed a credential or certificate. So this scenario 3 is what we're really talking about today, and this is what we're hoping to work towards. If you already have access to the National Student Clearinghouse, again, maybe you don't know, but you actually do. And hopefully, you know, what I'll share in a moment will give you more information. So again, they're working with all these colleges and universities. According to their website, it says 97% of students enrolled in public and private institutions. That's a lot of information. Now, let's go back to scenario 1 and talk about how difficult it really is for an AEL provider. If you're not a college, again, if you're ESC, ISD, anything besides a college, how difficult it actually is to capture post-secondary enrollment. So again, your option would either be reaching out to the participant, cold calling them, whatever you do, going to their house, I don't know, or you have an established relationship with a college and they're sharing information with you. Well, for Far West, let's really look at what this looks like. So Far West is going to be our AEL provider in El Paso, Texas, and they consist of Socorro ISD, El Paso ISD, and Isleta ISD. So you have 3 ISDs working together, and they're trying to capture post-secondary enrollment. Well, you know, what we've really been emphasizing is, hey, build a relationship with the community college. Well, what if the student doesn't decide to go to the community college? Because as you'll see here, these are a few of the options that the student has to attend within a 50-mile radius of El Paso. So you have Howard Payne University, you have Park University, El Paso Community College, University of Phoenix, New Mexico State University, Western Tech University, University of Texas, Southwest University, not to mention online universities. So we have a lot of universities nowadays that are offering their services online, and they could be anywhere in the United States. So what if a student, you know, especially our military population, what if they decide to do online studies, right? So now the problem just got bigger. The problem is no longer, okay, I need to just get one college and work with them, because if you're only working with one college, you're probably missing other opportunities of where a student is enrolling, for services. And again, you are not able to capture post-secondary enrollment. So that's something really, really important to know. The other thing is here, what I have highlighted in yellow. So I checked the NSC website and they do have a list of all the schools that are participating in the data collection. These 4 are. They're verified that they are in the National Student Clearinghouse. And if anyone enrolls or attends these organizations, that data will be available. Now, this is the other thing I want you guys to keep in mind. So a lot of times we just think about our surrounding community and we're just thinking, well, we just really need to work with the local schools. So even if you had MOUs with all these schools, which would be amazing to share information, what if a student decides to leave the state? What if the student decides to go to another part of the state? Again, you will not be able to capture post-secondary enrollment. So that is another benefit of working with this National Student Clearinghouse, because they will capture, as long as that school is participating with them, they will capture the information of where that student is enrolled. And you also will be able to capture that information for post-secondary enrollment. So that is the benefit. The true benefit is that it makes capturing this information easier, but it also expands your access of information across the country. It's not just Texas. It's not just in your city. It's if a student goes beyond Texas. So that's I think really, really awesome. So the next thing I wanted to share was the survey results. So we had 42 respondents. Thank you very much for everyone who did respond. So this went out January 31st. And I think we only gave you 3 days to respond, but it was only 3 questions. We had, of those 42 respondents, 15 of them were colleges and 9 of our grant recipients did not respond. So we have 37 grant recipients total. So only 9 of them did not respond. So we had almost all the grant recipients respond. And then we had a couple of sub-recipients respond also, but 15 colleges. So keep in mind that some of these answers are coming from the colleges. So 1, do you or your institution have access to the National Student Clearinghouse? Many of you were not sure. Some of you definitely knew, and then some of you said a definite no. Is the National Student Clearinghouse currently being used to verify post-secondary enrollment after participants exit AEL services? 10 of the respondents didn't know, 25 said no, and then 7 said yes. Is the National Student Clearinghouse currently being used to verify credential attainment? 11 don't know, 2 yes, and 29 no. So this credential attainment, we are not covering that in this presentation, I want you to know, but we will possibly be having a future webinar to cover that. Right now, it's just the post-secondary enrollment, but good to know for future presentations. So who has access? 100% of all colleges that are grant recipients or sub-recipients are participants with the National Student Clearinghouse. So if you want to see the full list, you can go to this link here. So basically, if you go here, there's an Excel list that shows all the schools that are participating nationwide, but you can filter it just for Texas. And so I went down the list and I checked every single one of our sub-recipients and grant recipients that are colleges, and you are on the list. So your organization is participating in the National Student Clearinghouse, which means your organization has access to the National Student Clearinghouse. Okay, so what is the National Student Clearinghouse? Just briefly, because I'm gonna ask you to go to the website and look at it for yourselves because I'm running out of time. It's a nonprofit. It was established in 1993, and basically they were simplifying a way to collect the information for colleges and things like that. So I'm going to share this video really quick, just 1 minute.
This is a brief high-level overview about what is Student Tracker. Student Tracker allows you to track students' educational outcomes nationwide. The National Student Clearinghouse receives post-secondary enrollment information from all types of institutions. These include 2-year, 4-year, graduate, public, private, trade, and vocational schools. The Clearinghouse covers 98% of all public and private U.S. college enrollment. Thus, utilizing Student Tracker is more reliable and cost-effective than survey data. Student Tracker provides non-survey-based reports illustrating the post-secondary enrollment, persistence, and completion of your former graduates or students. It helps you better understand how well your academic programs are preparing former graduates for post-secondary education. It will also help your staff to see which top schools your students are attending after graduation. In conclusion, it illustrates post-secondary success of your former graduates based on various demographic characteristics and academic histories. For more information and tutorials, please visit our Clearinghouse Academy site at www.clearinghouseacademy.org and click on Secondary Education.
Okay, so there was a couple of other documents that we put in the chat. If you could take your time to look these over, I'm not going to go over in detail. If you have questions, please reach out to me. But basically, once you have an account set up with them, if you don't already have access to their database, but you need to go through them directly, this explains to you how to submit what they need in order to match. And what they'll send back to you is a report. It usually takes 5 to 7 business days. So what we really want to pay attention to is, again, the information that they give you in terms of where that student is enrolled. So they can be tracked to all of these different schools across the United States, whether it's a public school, private school, it's a 2 years, at 4 year, the state. And here, because you've provided them some information, you'll be able to look at where that specific person is. So this document, I want to say, would be enough for us to verify that post-secondary MSG type 1B to be kept in a student's file. So the bottom line that I want to get to at the end of the day in terms of, okay, what documentation would we use or get so that we could enter this in the system? There should be a start and end date for the individual. So that's the date that you would put in for the start date. Again, teams would generate the end date. Okay, great. So with the conclusion of sharing that information, we want to go ahead and now hand it over to Josh Hayes, AEL Director for College of the Mainland, and he can share his experience with the National Student Clearinghouse.
Thanks, Elena. Like she said, my name is Joshua Hayes. I'm the Director of Adult Education at College of the Mainland. And what I'm going to tell you is a little story about our look at post-secondary enrollments. So we are a college, and part of that is we're really interested in seeing where our students end up. And towards the end of this previous program year, I noticed that for a college our size, we had a kind of a disproportionate number of post-secondary enrollments. And I wanted to look and see why that was and what was really moving the needle, because I didn't think I was doing anything that special. So the systems that we use is really called matching. So when you're doing matching versus follow-up, it's two different ways of trying to document how a student transitions. And it's really important to understand why you match. A match really doesn't require the student participation. In most instances, student enrollment and credential completion is public record, unlike grades, attendance, and those sort of things. And for different systems, whether it be my own college's system or the National Student Clearinghouse, matching uses existing information that I have about a student, and it looks at both the internal systems of the college and the National Student Clearinghouse to see if a student enrolled in post-secondary education, and if so, when they did. This was kind of our last 5 years, and as you can see, we had up until 21-22, we were doing okay. College of the Mainland enrolls of just under 1,000 12-plus hour participants, and we had about 40 or so. The previous years had been not as good, but we had done a lot of work with TSI prep, and we were doing a better job of looking to see, did our TSI prep students actually show up at the college and documenting that. In addition, I had started looking at all of our GED completers to see, well, one by one, if you're a GED completer, did you end up going to College of the Mainland? When we got to the end of 22-23, though, I realized that the data system I was using, it didn't care if I gave it a list of students from the college prep class or a list of students that completed their GED. It would take any list of students that were in our enrollment system and match it with those things. And so that's where you see our first attempt in 22-23. For our enterprise system, we use a data library called Zogotech. And so in the 22-23, I went back and looked at 2018, 2019, and I said, hey, if I look at all of the students that were enrolled during that year, how many of them actually showed up in a credit program that year or the year following. So we found 299 enrollments. That was an increase over 1,000%. And that wasn't anything that we did. This was looking at old data and making sure that we simply looked for the match. So going back, you can see that these were substantial underreports every year. I missed where I had like 42 in 2018-19. I had over 160, close to 170. And that trend stayed pretty close. We all kind of had the same little dip in 2021. These are all magnitude. These aren't percentages. So as I started doing this and looking back over the last 5 years and saying, well, how are these students moving and to what degree, I realized that we actually had the access to the National Student Clearinghouse, which would give me other school enrollments. That's a technical phrase from the National Student Clearinghouse. The expectation if you're a college and you're matching students is that you don't need your own enrollments. So if you're an adult ed program and you're at a college and you're using the National Student Database, you need to find your own enrollments within your enterprise system. If you're not a college or if you're a program that's going to use the student tracker, it'll capture all of these for every public post-secondary in the state, unless the student has specifically requested to suppress those records. As told to us by the representative from National Student Clearinghouse, fewer than 3% do that, and they tend to be clustered in certain institutions that advise students to behave that way. So in general, these enrollments are public directory information available for matching for anyone that uses the service. So I went back and I looked at 18-19 again, and I asked them, did any of these have NSC transfers? Did these students show up at any other schools? So I got an additional 160 enrollments for that period. As you'll see, the oldest cohort has the highest number by far of individuals matching. What happens over time is the longer a student is exited, the more likely they are to go to school. So if you're looking at 1 year, the number will be shorter than looking at 2 years or 3 years of data. So that's where that comes. But as it stands, when we look at the aggregate matches, you can see what my looking at particular groups, which is the blue. So if I'm looking for my TSI prep students, or I'm looking for my GED grads, or I'm having my career navigators follow up specifically to collect documentation from the student, that represents the blue. Whenever I went and matched with my own college's enrollment system for students we might not have contact with, that represents the orange. And the gray at the top is the NSC verified transfers for each cohort year. Undoubtedly, there's going to be some duplication in here. So 22, 23 is not 250, but it's not 80 either. So, we're leaving a lot of these catches on the table when we have a very simple solution to verifying those enrollments, both by date and by location. Like I said, it'll be slightly different if you're a college using your existing system to verify enrollments. You'll need to check your own college data system and then NSC for those that happen outside of your institution. If you're using Student Tracker as an independent organization, it'll show you the post-secondary education enrollments at 98% of all the schools in the United States. And that's what we saw. I thought it was pretty dramatic.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.